Hello everyone, welcome in. This is section 2.2, Understand Movement Through Human Anatomy Simplification of Chyan's class, all the way up here at the top. Drawing and coloring anime style characters. Just as a quick note for today, I'm going to be officially changing the upload schedule of these reviews to 3 to 4 days rather than the past 2 to 3. I've got school coming up here very soon, and I need to start working on my portfolio as well, so that when I get my degree from said school, I'll be able to start and hopefully land a job within my desired field of art. So because of that, I need a little bit more time to work on these things between videos, but hopefully you guys will understand where this is coming from. And as always, I appreciate the continued support you guys have shown for these videos so far. So getting into today's lecture, I found that as we move on through Chyan's class, it becomes more and more about practicality rather than the formality and principles that he teaches himself. Unlike other lecturers that we've seen so far, Chyan shows a lot more sort of like a field point of view and a perspective on sort of what to draw, what not to draw, and what to avoid / tips and tricks in order to better help align artists that are interested in this field of study. Which is really awesome for those who want to get started ASAP working commercially, or those who are just very blunt and want to get to the point when it comes down to the aspects to incorporate with the fundamentals. So in regards to this class, today's class was on a lot about perspective, as well as just how to get into the process of sketching and drawing. So to start, understanding contrapposto, which is an Italian term, I believe, for counterpoise or counterpose, which in this context really means sort of like more natural movements to help illustrate natural poses. And we can get a little bit more into the details of how we can do this, and further along in this class review, it'll make more sense later. And we begin a little bit more about the simplification process that Chyan talks about, which is pretty much just to help move the mannequin that we started building up and understanding in section 2.1. The goal is to focus on accuracy and speed in sketching, which helps put down initial ideas of illustration before it really changes with our imagination. Remember, the goal of this class is to draw with intention. Simplify to however works best for your accuracy and speed to be comfortable when it comes down to simplifying in regards to shape, line, and form. I'll show some examples up here that you can help see a little bit about how different artists will vary in their simplification process. And a good thing to note is that even if details of accuracy are lost in sketching due to simplification, if you start oversimplifying the forms and shapes and the nuances that they have, they can be re-added in later steps. When first observing movement of a study, a good way to start is to analyze and draw, or really just draw on top of it and really understand and break down the reference that you're looking at. Understand the movement of the different parts of the figure themselves in order to better analyze it and understand what's happening. Focus on the movements rather than the outline and tracing the lines that you see. Understand that you're drawing them for a purpose and why they're there and sort of what they're doing and how they're being changed with the figure themselves. Remember that the goal ultimately is to practice drawing the proportions thought of. So for us, when we're sort of moving from this sketch phase from a study, the big thing to note for anime style illustrators is the different lengths and proportional changes. So the head's going to be slightly bigger. The ratio from the face is going to be different. Those are all thoughts to have when changing the drawing of the proportions. When drawing, if you don't have enough basics for a stage that you're working on, then focus on the smaller steps that you can sort of create and add together to make the bigger effect of the stage. So if you're having a lot of trouble with drawing, let's say a hand, you can draw a basic square shape, size of it, just to help illustrate the idea that that's going to be a hand, and then come back to that phase later and work on the smaller details of it when your sketch starts getting up to speed with the rest of what you need. And as always, a very important part, draw as best as possible rather than on speed. Yes, the goal is on speed, but that'll naturally come in time. Results are viewed in quality, not time. An important thing to note, which it gets to my head a lot, so I understand where this point is coming from. For the most part, sketching is mainly just used to convey ideas, and it's going to be kind of difficult to work in a professional sphere if the majority or even a lot of time is spent on the smaller steps that most pros just kind of skim through. However, at the end of the day, you have a portfolio that's shown just as 2D and not as an aspect of time, and even if it includes an aspect of time, your portfolio, the only thing that is shown when it comes down to metadata is the upload day or the posting day that you show the artwork. No one's going to see how long it took you unless you outwardly state it yourself or you're directly asked by your employer. So yes, while speed is the goal, ultimately at the end of the day, if you're showing people, if you're showing If you're uploading on social media, if you're showing potential employers, or if you're showing clients, it's really, really important to show your best work. Show people what you're really, really capable of in your art. And some quick tips that he kind of mentions over really quick upon hands and feet, which are the struggle aspects of many, many people, including myself. The thumb and the pinky are separate regions from the palm, which is generally drawn as a square, and the 3 middle fingers, which are generally divided into thirds on that square that you can draw. And that's mainly because the thumb and the pinky themselves act almost independently to the palm, or they outstretch the figure themselves so far away from the middle 3 fingers that it's best to isolate and draw them themselves. And then quick note, a thumb reaches just the top of the palm, and the pinky is never longer than the second knuckle of the ring finger if it helps you relate the sizing of the fingering. So for the feet, a heel is a trapezoidal shape, and then it's followed by a flat short section, which you can use as the toes, and then you can have a flexible figure drawn in between those 2 shapes to imply the middle arch, which has a varied form as mentioned because it's the foot arch and there's not really bone. It's more so just skin and muscle, I guess. So getting back into the process for studying reference material, when drawing the rough drafts, draw the general posing and simplify where comfortable. Fix proportions as additional details are added, and to put an emphasis on movements, even if proportions are a bit wrong. Movements have the biggest impact on the nuance of the post. It's important to know that natural movements, including incorrect proportions, is better than proper proportions with poor movements. Even if your figure looks and is anatomically correct, if it looks strange, you're kind of missing the whole point of drawing an aesthetically appealing character. So the first thing we want to do is use basic shapes and forms to convey what we want, and then refining the detail from there while still maintaining that initial impression that the figure gives off. You want to train muscle memory and posing with photo references. Photo references are great for understanding more natural movements. Photo references will help a lot with your anatomical accuracy and getting a stronger feel of natural movements. Understand how muscles work in order to get better curves and lines, and those more particular details will help give a better nuance to your figure. Drawing a grid across the parts of the figure actually helps you with angle and perspective too. If it helps, I'll show some examples of that here. It's a really great way to help better illustrate and understand the form that you're drawing in 3D space. A couple of quick points on perspective, which are actually very, very interesting and are going to start showing the differences between lectures here. As for Chyan, his perspective on perspective is that the number of vanishing points can be infinite depending on the object, and that proportion distorts depending on distance, which for a quick note actually widens when you get closer to the point of view. But what this really conveys in his opinion is that stressing fundamentals of perspective can force objects implemented with it to look stiff. So the big takeaway that he has on it, that's going to vary from other lectures, is that it's always better for something to look correct even if it isn't, and to apply perspective rather than abiding by it. So absolutely, it is okay to draw something that is not within perspective, or maybe cheats perspective or form or anatomy, as we already do with proportion, in order to better convey the impression of the drawing. And then some quick things: muscles stick to bones when drawing joints. So this also kind of relays back to the point of understanding muscles in order to better convey form. When you understand how that muscle interacts with the bones, and when those bones are placed in different 3D space, we can draw more anatomically correct and nuanced muscles. And then the ultimate goal of simplification is to draw as fast as possible, as accurately as possible, as mentioned, and to practice the practice process, which I'm going to start detailing here for those who are interested. Study outlines with both photos and illustrations. So photos and illustrations both omit and include details that the other do not. Photos are going to include more natural movements and strict rules of perspective and proportion, and illustrations are going to have a lot more of the creative differences that you might want to study for yourself. Set the correct proportions of the figure first before moving into simplification. Like said, you really want to get the impression of the figure down first before refining the details. Even if the details look poor now, the impression is first and foremost. And then modify the proportions from photo references as needed, like mentioned, in order to better help fit whatever style you're working in. So quick review and short end of this is that the photo reference study process is first going to be drawing the movement of the figure and creating that initial impression, then drawing the proportions of the figure and changing those to better fit within whatever style you're working in, and then to refine the details with lines that comes from a better understanding of anatomy. And then as a side note, you will be practicing and analyzing perspectives with this, so it is a good thing to keep in mind as you draw these new figures. So as a quick summary to this lecture that I thought was appropriate, Understand the 3-step reference process, which I talked about here, in order to create better figure studies. Understand how muscles work in order to get better curves and lines, which create the nuance of your figure studies. And then perspective and style will come within proper reference studies so long as they are applied, and pretty much you want to stay mindful of perspective and study as you work through your reference studies. And then the self-assigned homework that I thought was appropriate is to study one photo reference, complete with the full study process as outlined from the lecture that I mentioned here, so that way your accuracy and speed in drawing and sketching figures can be much more refined. So that was 2.2 of Chyan's class. Hopefully this class review helped those who are interested, especially those who are getting started with sketching your figures and really creating your mannequin that you've begun to master in 3D space. Like I said, this is a lot of very practical advice and tools that Chyan is giving us, which does require a lot of practice. So hopefully you guys are practicing a lot and really making use of the points that Chyan is teaching us so far. Section 2.3 is going to be coming up next, which is going to include the face, which is super exciting. We can start giving off some more personality to the figures that we're drawing in our studies now. And hopefully I'll see you guys in that lecture. And of course, I hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you in the next one.